Hey lovely people, how are you doing out there? In this video, I'm going to show you how we can use the amazing object jit.gl.textureset from the Jitter Tools package. Jitter Tools package that you can find here into Extras, Jitter Tools Launch. You can see the object in the Jitter Tools package at the moment. jit.gl.textureset is one of those. It's an amazing object that allows us to load a lot of images inside it as textures. So it's a lot like jit matrix set, but instead of loading a set of matrices, it loads a set of textures, which is even better because they will run on the GPU and they are much faster. So the advantage of loading a lot of images at the same time before using them is that they are then preloaded and we don't have the loading time when we want to use them. So we can just output them without caring about the loading time. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to show you how we can crossfade between the previous texture and the current one. So the one that is currently output and the one that was previously output. And we do a crossfade between those. So you can have like a nice slide of your vacation photos. You can show it to your grandmother and you can be happy that you made it in Max. So that's the goal of the video. Make a slide presentation of your vacation photos. And without any further ado, let's jump into the coding. We will start from scratch. So have fun. So let's start from the very scratch. As you can see, I just got a JIT world with floating one, size of the window enabled by default, and for scale anti-aliasing great. Now what we need to do is to load a folder with some images. For example, here I got a folder with a bunch of images. There is another folder inside with some more images, but I just want to get this folder called images. So in order to get a folder, to load all the files inside a folder, we can use the folder object. And let's give it as types PNG and JPEG. So it will only read the files that have these extensions. Let's actually load bank that. So every time we open the patch, it will automatically already just check those. This message will be sent to the folder object, because I think this is not an attribute that we can set in the folder object. As far as I know, no, I don't think so. So good. To pass the folder path to the folder object, we can create a drop file object. That's the drop file. And let's connect the message box here. So we will store the path, and we can send it directly to the folder object. Now, the folder object, every time it receives a path to a folder, will print all the elements, the name of the elements it finds in that folder. So let's give it a try. If I go here, select this folder, drop it here. I think I forgot to send this message to the folder object, otherwise she should have printed the stuff. So let's try again. Okay, now we go. Okay, so you can see it prints the clear message and then followed by a bunch of append messages followed by the name of the files it found in the folder. That's the name of my images in that folder. Good. So instead of dropping all the time the folder, I will just use this message box to trigger the folder object by just clicking on this message box. Good. So as we saw, it prints this clear message and then a bunch of append. So what we want to do is to basically root append. So we only have the name of the files without the append and without the clear. Okay, so that's great. Now we want to send those images files to the jit.gl.textureset object. This is the object that we are going to use that will store those image files as textures, so not as matrices but as textures. So it will have the advantage that textures will work on the GPU, since they are images that they are stored on the GPU memory. So images on the GPU memory, and this allows us to work on them in a super fast way because they use the graphic processing unit instead of the CPU. So this is much more performant. So what we want to do is to store those image files inside the jit.gl.textureset object. Now, in order to do that, if we check the help file of the jit.gl.textureset object, we can see that basically What we need to do is to send it an index, followed by the texture, to store that texture at that index. And then we can send the output texture, followed by the index of that texture, to output the image at that index. So in order to store those images inside the texture set, we first need to, store them inside a JIT matrix and then pass this matrix to jit.gl.textureset, because I don't think that we can read them with like a read message directly into jit.gl.textureset. So let's do like this. Let's create a JIT matrix which will read those images. So here we can say prepend import movie. But if we just do that, JIT matrix will say that it doesn't know where these objects are, where these files are. You cannot find them because these files are not in the max search path. So we actually need to give to JIT matrix the full path of those images. In order to do that, we can use the sprint object with sim out. So it will output a symbol. We can get the path followed by the name of the object. So the first %s will be the path that we can basically send buff by the drop file. So let's do actually a trigger here. So we can send this path buff by the, let's do like this. Can send it first to the sprint object. No, actually we want to send it to a ZL reg object to store it. Right, and then we send it to the folder object. So the folder finds the image names and does its thing. And then every time we send the import movie inside we basically need to send. Actually, we need to send the name of the file here into the second inlet of the sprint object. So this will be the name of the file. Let's actually write it. That's the name of the file from that cable. Let's do a little bubble comment. So this is where the name of the file goes, and that's actually the name of this is the path of the folder. Path of the folder. Right, so good. This then goes into the prepend import movie, so we will prepend the wall path. So we will prepend import movie to the wall path, to the image. Great, and we need to trigger this, the path, every time we send the name of the image to the sprint. So let's do like this. Guess we can do like this. This should be a symbol. I'm not sure this is a symbol, so let's actually cast it to a symbol with a toSymbol object here. So this will go here, and then we trigger this ZL reg. So sorry, actually this was wrong. It should go in the cold inlet, right? So we store the path to this folder in the cold inlet, and then we trigger it every time we send the name of the image in the cold inlet here, and then we trigger the name of the path to the folder. So we will trigger the wall sprint output. So now it should work. Let's give it a try. Okay, the image, the JIT matrix object is probably loading all the images, but what we need to do is not just loading them, we need actually to output them and store them inside the jit.gl.textureset. So we need an index for the jit.gl.textureset to store the images. So let's create a counter here. And every time we send a path to the folder object, we probably want to set this counter back to 0. So we can do this, set the counter to 0 as first thing we do. This will be the first thing we do. And then once we are here, we want to basically probably after we send the import movie message to the matrix, we actually want to then send a bang to this counter. And then we actually want to send a bang to the matrix itself in order to output that image, that matrix. So like this, we first send the, oh, that's not a symbol, by the way, that's a list. That's a list because this import movie followed by the path to the image. So this should be okay. This we can send to the jit.gl texture set. And this we have to say index. Let's create a message box and say index $1 with the index of the current image. And now this should, all these images should be stored inside jit.gl texture set. So let's give it a try. Let me just click here. Good. And now we can output those images from jit.gl texture set with the output texture message with an index. So let's give it a try with jit.p window. So this goes here, this jit.gl texture set goes to the P window, and let's see what we get. Cool. So we are getting some images. Actually, at index 0, this is not actually the first image in my folder. Actually, this is the first image for colors.jpg. So something went wrong here. Oh, and I can tell you just right now what went wrong. Basically, first we need to send the bang to the counter for the index, and then we need to send to the jit.gl texture set the image. So wrong order here. It should actually be like this. First we send the bang to the counter to set the new index, then we send the message then we send the list to the jit matrix to load the image, and then we send the bang to the jit matrix to output the bang to jit.gl texture set. So let's try again. I will load all the images. Cool. Here they are. Let's give it a try. Let's see if they got loaded correctly. Okay, so index 0 is the first image, and so on. There should be 18 images inside that folder. We can actually see that, how many files that are in that folder if we attach a message box to the second outlet of folder, because this will give us the number of file that it found in that folder. So it should be 18 files. And as you can see, it's not really working. It's not giving us 18 files. It's stopping at 15 file. And I think that's because inside the jit.gl texture set there is a texture count attribute which is set by default to 15. If we go check the code, we can see that the texture count attribute is set by default to 15. There's a JavaScript code. So we need to set the texture count attribute of jit.gl texture set, which you can say we could do it by sending the number of files that have been found by the folder object, but unfortunately the message with the number of files found only comes after the folder object outputs all the name of the files already. So as you can see, this is the last thing that comes out from the folder object. So that's a bit unfortunate because we need to have that as the first thing. So one very basic thing we could do, could just create another folder object and just send first the path to that object. Right, very basic stuff. And then this will give us the number of files in that folder. And then we use that as the attribute for jit.gl texture set, the texture count attribute. I think we can do that. Nobody, it's going to stop us from doing that, I think. So let's create a sender and say texture count here. Let's send it to jit.gl texture set. Let's actually call it image count, is a bit more correct. That's not directly related to textures. So let's say that's how many images we have inside that folder. So that, and then we can say prepend texture count. Good. We can connect this to jit.gl texture set. Let's maybe put it here and let's give it a try again. Oh, of course, I forgot to send the message types as well to this other folder object, otherwise it will not work. So let's give it a try again. Good. And let's see if now this worked and we got all the images. Yes, we did. The image number 16, it's, I guess, just an image with alpha 0, right? And a black image inside the black ground with alpha 0, so that's all just black, basically. Cool. So yeah, it seems to work correctly. Great. Cool. We got it to work. And now I want to show you how we can do like a mix fade, so a crossfade, between one image, one random selected image, and the next one. So one random selected image and the next one. It's not difficult, it's not something complex, it's just something that is useful in a lot of cases, and yeah, it's good maybe if you see it done by me. So let's give it a try. What we want to do is to create a GGL pix inside. Right, and we want to just use it as a fader. So we just want to create a mix object here, want to create a param and call it like crossfade or something with a default value of 0. Good, and now we can say crossfade here, $1, and then we can crossfade between the input number 1 and the input number 2. Now, the input number 1 is going to be our new texture, while the input number 2 is going to be the texture that was output before. So in order to do that, let's basically create a queue method that will output those images every, I don't know, every 5 seconds. I will set it to active 1 by default. Right? So every 5 seconds it will output a new image. Let's maybe say every 3 seconds. Maybe let's send this to the Jit world object. So I will just do like this. Let's create send final out. Where this will come out from this GGL pix here, and this we send to the Jit world. So it will just going to be drawn on the rendering window. So now I need to attach jit.gl.textureset to GGL pix. There we go. Cool. It's preserving the aspect by default. That's a property of the Jit world video plane, which will preserve aspect on by default. So it will preserve the aspect of the input texture. Cool. So what am I doing? I'm just triggering an integer here. That's not what I want to do. I actually want to create a random number between 0 and the number of images that we got in the folder, -1. So this is what random will do exactly, create a random number between 0 and the number that it receives, -1. So let's actually send it again the image count with by clicking again on this message box, so it will restart the whole chain. So we got now numbers between 0, so actually random numbers. So basically between 0 and image count -1, right? That's what's happening. Okay, cool. So now we need to crossfade. Crossfade between what? Well, we want to crossfade between this image and the image that was previously output. So let's create a GGL texture in order to store this texture. So let's create a trigger here, LL. So we'll first send the image into a GGL texture object to store it, and then we will send this inside a GGL pix, and then we send a new one here. Let's actually create 2 GGL texture because we need to store both those images actually. So actually we don't need to do this TLL. So I'm just improvising at the moment. Right, I have an idea of how to do that in my mind, but I still don't know how exactly to do that. This will come out as we do it. So I think we're going to use the cycle object to send this texture once to the first and once to the other one. So let's give it a look. Oh, and of course we need, this is just going to pass a single message, not a whole list. So let's do like this. Let's send this to a symbol, then send it to the cycle. And I guess this should work. Does it understand when this is a symbol? Apparently not. So let's unsymbolize it here. So from symbol, something like that. Yep. So we use the cycle to cycle the outputs. It's not the audio cycle object, this is just a cycle object, which means it will just send the output once into the left outlet and once into the right outlet, and then again into the left and then into the right. We just cycle between these two outlets. Great. So when the outlet is coming into the first texture, we will slowly fade from the second one to the first one. And when it's coming into the first texture, and then when it's coming to the second texture, we will fade from the first one to the second. So that's the plan. So let's do like this with a line object 0 and 20. 0 is the default value, 20 is how many milliseconds this is going to send out a bang. Actually, I am at 60 frames per second, so if we say 1000 divided by 60, this is 16 milliseconds per frame, so I guess we can say that every 60 milliseconds it should output the new value. So let's do like this. Let's create a trigger here, list bang. So we send, that's actually a symbol, right? So we can say also s bang. So when the image comes from into the first outlet, we can say that from 1 you have to go to 0 in, I don't know, let's say 1 second. Since we are outputting a new image every second, every 3 seconds, I think 1 second delay crossfade time is good. And then in the other case, from 0, it will go to 1 in 1 second. So that's the other case. So let's give it a try. Let's see what we get. And of course, we need to trigger every time we do that. Nevertheless, we need to trigger the first texture because it's the one that is going to trigger the output from the GGL pics. So let's do like this, trigger bang float, right? Or we could actually continuously trigger the output for this texture, but maybe it's not necessary. We can just trigger it when the line sends out a new number. So yeah, seems to be working. We are now crossfading between the previous image and the next one. This is the next image. Right, this is black. And it's some more forests. Right. Yeah, that's it. That's it, it's working, this was it. So this is basically our crossfade time. This 1000 is crossfade time. This 3000 is the in how much time we send out a new texture. Time before new image comes out. And since they are all textures and they are already stored inside the GGL texture set, we don't have to wait every time for the image to be loaded by a JIT matrix or a GGL texture object. So that's the big advantage of this approach, that we basically don't have the loading time. The images are already preloaded, and that's super cool because then we can just output them. Without having to load them. So that's great. And I just wanted to show you how I will go about this. So the next level of this video will be to use the GGL polymovie object, which is a great object that allows us to play, to load a lot of movies, to preload a lot of movies, and then to play them actually also at the same time. So it's awesome. It's an awesome object. And we're going to see how to use that in the next video. But for the moment, this was about the GGL texture set. Now, as you can see, there is a problem with the aspect ratio of the textures because they are all different sizes. So actually, if we wanted to have them all the same aspect ratio, we could, for example, put texture here at the output with some fixed dimensions and also say adapt 0. This will basically fix this problem, but some images will not show in the correct proportions. That will just show if they were all full HD. Okay, everyone. I hope this was useful, and if you liked the video, please put a like to the video, subscribe to the channel. This will help the channel get more visibility, and suggest the channel to your friends that are starting with Jitter in Maxon, or even if they're advanced users. whatever you do is appreciated. Just do what you want. Anyway, thanks again for following. I will see you in the next video. Have fun. See you soon. Ciao.